So thank you, everyone, for joining this afternoon. Now it's afternoon. And I hope everyone enjoyed the keynote, and welcome to day one of Trailhead DX. Is this anyone's first Trailhead DX year joining? Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that you're all here. Trailhead DX is one of my favorite events at Salesforce because it's all focused on learning. And it's something that we really put a lot of energy into putting together, and the guiding mission for everything we do here is learning. So thank you for joining. Thank you for joining me for your lunch hour. Before we get started, you probably just saw this slide. This is a Salesforce presentation. I am a Salesforce employee. I'd like to ask all of you to make all purchasing decisions based on currently available technologies. However, today we're not going to be spending that much time talking about specific technologies, because today we're talking about how we can develop behaviors and habits as app builders, as developers, as admins, as business analysts that help us take advantage of these new technologies that we're constantly releasing. Now, as I'm going through my talk today, you may notice, well, I'm sure you've noticed, we've got an amazing graphic artist here, Tamsin Mitchell, and she'll be graphically recording my talk today, so we can have a visual representation of what we're talking about as well. So I'm really honored to have Tamsin join us today, so thank you very much, Tamsin. I mean, what she does is amazing. She just drew Astro just in like 15 seconds. It was amazing. So my name is Leanne Reimel. I'm a principal evangelist here at Salesforce. I've been at Salesforce for 9 years, and for all of the roles I've had at Salesforce, I've always been very focused on our builders, on our technical audience, our developers, our admins, our business analysts, our aspiring developers and admins. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about what are those behaviors that we develop as builders that help us take advantage of technologies, that help us continue to be leaders in our own spaces. And so that's what I'd like to share with you today. And before we get started, I'd like to thank all of you. We would not have this conference without you. We would not have our customer ecosystem without you. The success of Salesforce is directly intertwined with the success of our customers, and specifically with the success of our builders, of our technical builders, of the people that are doing interesting things with our platform and sharing them with one another and sharing them with their organizations. And so I want to thank all of you that are here today, all of you that participate in the community, that participate in the Salesforce ecosystem, because as an organization, we wouldn't be where we were if it wasn't for our community. So we really want to thank all of you. I'd like to thank all of you. I'm also very inspired by our community. I love seeing the interesting things that people are doing with the platform, because we can sit in our offices at Salesforce all day and come up with ways that we think it's interesting to use technology, but it takes it further when we look at how are our customers finding new, interesting ways to solve problems that maybe we didn't even know existed. We've talked a lot the last couple of years about the fourth industrial revolution, and sometimes it can be a little confusing what it means when you see this slide. It's like, okay, I've got trains, I've got electricity. What does this fourth industrial revolution mean for my day-to-day life? What does this mean for me? And we all are actively participating in this as consumers. Like, I know, does anyone here have like a voice assistant in their home of any type, like any sort of Google, Alexa, right? So we're actively participating in this. We expect our apps to be smart, our consumer apps. We expect our homes to be smart. We all want to turn off our lights in our home with the Alexa and do our garage door up and down. And so we have this expectation, and we're really participating in this actively as consumers, but we're all in this room also members of the technical jobs ecosystem, right? And so we're seeing this happen as consumers, and we're participating in it, and it's impacting our lives with robotics. It's impacting our lives with advances made in medicine, things that we might not even know are impacting us, right? The way that we're receiving medical care, the way that our information is being processed, the way that we're able to engage with consumer apps, engage with technologies. But that's all as consumers, right? So we spend a lot of time thinking, what does this mean for us as developers, as app builders, as actual participants in this technical community? Because the organizations that we work for, the organizations that we work with, that we consult with, they believe that AI is the future. 84% of executives believe that AI is what will help them obtain a competitive advantage. So for pretty much everyone in this room, everyone in the technical jobs ecosystem, everyone that is pursuing a career in tech in whatever capacity, this is impacting us, right? And sometimes it can feel like, okay, we know that this is a priority for the leaders in our world, but what does this mean for me as a participant? What does this mean for me as a developer? What does this mean for me as an analyst? And I believe very firmly that this is an incredible time of opportunity for everyone who's in the Salesforce technical ecosystem or joining the Salesforce technical ecosystem, because we're really well positioned to take advantage of all of these advances that are happening with the enterprises that we're working with the companies that we're working with. And so it might feel like a crack sometime. It might feel like there's a divide. And I know I spent a lot of time talking to members of our community, talking to builders in our community, and it can sometimes feel like I'm not sure where my spot is as we go forward, right? As I know my company wants to pursue AI, but what does that mean for me? And I believe that we're well positioned, and I do know that the numbers support that. We see the Salesforce jobs ecosystem growing in an incredible way. I mean, 3.3 million Salesforce-related jobs by 2022. That is a staggering number. As someone who joined the Salesforce ecosystem when I felt like everyone I told didn't even know what Salesforce was. When I became a Salesforce developer and app builder back in 2007, I kept having to explain, what is Salesforce, what is Salesforce? And now you don't really have to explain anymore because it's really taking over the technical landscape as far as the jobs, skills that employers are looking for. And we're having a really big impact. You are having a really big impact on GDP, $1 billion in social impact. And these are good jobs. These are obtainable jobs. These are good jobs to have because 2 of the top 7 jobs of 2017 were being a Salesforce admin and being a Salesforce developer. So all of you here that are already part of the Salesforce ecosystem, you're well positioned to be leaders as this landscape grows, right? You're well positioned to help lead that next generation of trailblazers, to help teach others, to really kind of cement your place in this 4th industrial revolution. And I believe that we are very strongly positioned for this, but I also believe that there's things we have to hone, there's behaviors that we have to hone that will help us as builders take advantage of it. So we're on the racetrack, we're in first place, but we still have to train, right? We still have to really hone those behaviors that ensure that we take advantage of that opportunity, that we are actively participating in this 4th industrial revolution, and that we're actively creating those habits and those behaviors that will help us continue to be leaders. And I spent a lot of time thinking about what are those habits, because if you've ever seen a presentation I've done before, all of my presentations are generally about here's how you build the app, here's how you build the page, here's how you take advantage of the technology. But we want to take a step back and think about what are the behaviors, what are the habits, what are those mental muscles that we need to work that will help us think about the app to build, that will help us think about the page to build, so that we're really primed and ready to build these solutions to be leaders. So as I thought about it, I really distilled it down to me, to how I think about apps, how I think about building technologies for the 10 years of my career in this industry. Having a habit of constant learning, developing techniques that help you be successful, developing techniques that help you be an expert, and thinking ahead. So let's start talking about constant learning. What does that mean? What is constant learning? I'm really inspired by Kimberly Bryant. She is the founder of Black Girls Code. She is a leader. She is an innovator. She's an educator. And as she's teaching young women all over the country, all over the world, how to code, how to take advantage of technologies, she's doing so with the driving force, the mission that they should learn how to be creators of technology, not just consumers. And we want to think about where the builders, where the product owners, we're not just consumers. We're not just consumers of Salesforce technology. All of you, if you own an implementation, if you participate in implementation, you're a product manager. You own that product. Because we hear a lot about how flexible and how open the platform is and how you can do so much. So you can't be reactive to that and just build things exactly the way that they're built in the documentation, right? You have to think about being a product owner, being a product manager, and taking advantage of that and building things your way and thinking ahead. So how do we develop that habit of constant learning? What does that look like? Well, all of these people have something in common, and it's not just that they're all very known figures. They have something in common with how they spent their time. Oprah, Sheryl Sandberg, Bill Gates, Benjamin Franklin, President Obama, they all committed to 5 hours a week of learning. It's called the 5-hour rule. I'm a constant learner. I love learning about learning, and I love thinking about how other people learn and reading about how other people learn and how students learn and how technologists learn. And all of these people spend time, really set aside time in their day, 1 hour a day, 5 days a week, you get weekends off, to constantly learn. And what does that look like? They all had different ways of doing this. Bill Gates famously reads 1 book a week. Benjamin Franklin used to write about how he would wake up early to read and write, and he would actually write at night reflection questions for himself to then write the answers to, so reflecting on what's been, what happened, what was going on, and to be thoughtful. And even President Obama spent 1 hour a day reading. And I know for myself, I always try to remind myself of that because I'm pretty dang busy. A lot of us are pretty dang busy. But I feel like I'm not busier than President Obama was when he was in office. Likely I'm not busier than Warren Buffett. And so if they can set aside that time to remain experts in their field and to continue to actively learn, then I can too. So what does this look like for us as builders? It means making a plan. So sitting down and thinking about, we're here at TDX, you're obviously committed to learning, right? What are those Salesforce skills? What are those technologies that you'll need to know in 3 months, that you'll need to know in 6 months, that you'll need to know in 9 months? So being thoughtful. Write it down on a list in your notepad, right? Like say, what are the technologies that maybe I don't need to know today? No one's asking me to know this today. But is it Einstein Prediction Builder? Is it using lightning-based components? Is it using different technologies that maybe your company hasn't asked you to learn or your job hasn't yet demanded? But how will you dedicate time to constant learning so that you're ready when those opportunities present themselves and you're ready to take advantage of technologies or opportunities as they arise? And expanding beyond, it's not just about Salesforce. I know we're at our Salesforce conference. It's not just about Salesforce. It's also looking at and thinking about areas of research that impact what you do. So when we were launching Quick Actions, does anyone remember when we launched Quick Actions? I think like 4 years ago. We were talking a lot about mobile app development, and that was when we really were seeing an enterprise-level shift to mobile app development. And it was really valuable to spend time as we're building these apps and helping our customers position to be successful, that we looked at the industry research on how consumers were interacting with mobile applications, right? It's very similar to the Salesforce origin story with Mark's story about, I saw that I was buying a book on Amazon and it was so easy and I wanted that to be as easy as, enterprise applications to be that easy. So thinking beyond Salesforce technologies and thinking beyond all the wonderful things that we're learning here, if you're developing for mobile, looking at the research, taking time to read the research on how people are interacting with technology, how people are interacting with mobile, where are those trends going, right? So think about areas of research that will impact your work. And find ways to insert this knowledge into your projects, right? So as you're learning, it's good to experiment with these things. So find ways to incorporate what are those things that I'm learning. So when we were learning a lot about how people were interacting with mobile technologies, that helped us better understand how our customers would benefit from using Quick Actions, right? Because it was that idea of micro moments and how people expected to interact with their phones was very, very quickly. They didn't want to have a whole, guided experience over many screens on their phone. They wanted to do things on their phone with micro moments. So that directly influenced how we thought about delivering actions to our customers and encouraging them to build. So think about how you can incorporate that knowledge from outside the Salesforce ecosystem into your projects and insert it and experiment and see what you then learn from it. Developing techniques. Does anyone know who this is? all my home chefs in the house. So I love cooking. I love Julia Child. I read a lot of her books. And if you've read any of her books or if you've ever seen her speak, she talks a lot about not here is the exact perfect recipe to create this roast, right? She talks a lot about the techniques. Like she has a whole book on how to fix your recipe when you mess it up, right? Like what is the complementary flavors that help you rebalance it? Because she teaches people techniques. That's always been a focus of hers. It's not about following a recipe exactly. We're not French pastry chefs here, right? It's about developing the techniques that help you be successful. And once you've developed those techniques, you don't need to follow the recipe in the same way. So I did mention I love to cook, and this is a book that I'm actually cooking through right now. And the entire book, it's called Romans 20. The entire book, it does have recipes in it. However, each recipe is meant to teach you some fundamentals of a technique. So how to work with butter, how to work with salt. Because the idea is, he's a very famous chef, he's part of the Beard Foundation. The idea is once you finish this, then you have this very strong foundation with which to develop your own recipes for cooking with salt, for how to work with butter. It's a delicious cookbook, by the way, obviously. And it's important that we develop those recipes. If you think about the first time maybe you made a lasagna, you followed, you're like, okay, I have to add exactly this much ricotta, I have to add exactly this much tomatoes. But then eventually you develop the techniques and you just know the right path, right? And you don't look at the recipe anymore. So how do we apply that to technologies? We do start with the recipes. Has anyone ever copy and pasted a formula or a Visualforce page? My first Visualforce page was a copy and paste job, right? And then I learned from there. I started inserting different fields into that, and I started learning how to work with it. And so we start with recipes. It's good to start with recipes. But we find those recipes, Trailhead answers, or on Trailhead with answers, all the amazing blogs that we see our customers put out. That's where you start. And so when there's something you want to learn, start with those recipes. That is great. That is exactly what you should do. And then experiment. Make those small changes, right? If you're experimenting with a trigger, and you have the trigger to create, before we had Process Builder, I think everyone copy and pasted the trigger of create a new opportunity when, renewal opportunity is closed, right? Like there is a few triggers out there that many of us probably used and reused in various orgs or experimented with as we were learning. But then make those triggers work for other objects, for other use cases. Make those lightning components work in other use cases. Experiment. Don't be afraid to get into your developer orgs, to get into your sandbox, and start to experiment with those changes and learn from them. And we can practice these changes, these learning paths all on our own, but when I'm developing my own lasagna recipe, it doesn't get better if I just eat it all myself every single time. I mean, it would be delicious, but it doesn't get better, right? It gets better when I share it, and when I get feedback on it, and when I make it visible and transparent, and when I make my family eat all the new recipes that I'm trying out. And it's the same with technology, right? It's the same. We have to share it. We have to talk about it. We have to get that feedback. So don't be afraid to fail, because it's not failure. It's a learning path, right? And so as you're building something, like when I'm working with building my first Lightning component, I show it to my fellow developers, and I say, hey, do you think I could have built this? Did it really require like two pages of code? Like, could I have done this in a more efficient way? Oh, there's a base component I didn't know I could use, right? And then it gets better, and then we learn. So be transparent, and that might be posting it on the Trailblazer community. That might be blogging about it. That might be elbowing your buddy at work and saying, hey, do you want to look at this component that I just built, right? Or this page I just built, or this prediction that I just built. So think about ways to show your work to people, because that's how it gets better, and that's how you continue to grow. We can't grow in a vacuum. We can't get better in a vacuum. I feel like it's been a long time since I've seen the actual picture of Albert Einstein and not our Einstein. Does anyone remember who this is? And Einstein was really a futurist, right? I mean, he was a lot of things, but he was a futurist. And I think that we can all try to think like futurists, and we should all aspire to think like futurists, because really, as product owners, as product managers of a technology in our careers, that's what we are. Right? We're product managers, and we have to be futurists. We can't be reactive to everything that's happening around us, because that doesn't set us up to build what the company needs in 6 months. We don't want to be chasing that. We want to be there when the company gets there in 6 months. And I think one of the quotes from Einstein that always sticks with me, and it's not a big glamorous quote about being a futurist, it's about looking at those individual problems as they present themselves and thinking to the next level. So it's not the problem as it presents itself today. It's what is the origin of this problem, and what is this going to mean in 3 months or 6 months? And we see this, I mean, we've all, again, if you manage a Salesforce implementation, who has not been asked by someone in the organization, hey, I need a checkbox on the leads object. Can you just add that checkbox? Right? I mean, that's, I see laughs over here, right? We've all kind of experienced this in different ways. This solutioning by the business and asking for what they need. And that's an opportunity for us to try to take it further and understand, where is that need coming from? Because if we just give them that checkbox, what is the problem behind that? Are they trying to solve for leads that want to be contacted for a specific initiative? Well, we know the solution for that, right? So how are we looking ahead and thinking ahead? Does anyone here ski? Is anyone skiers here? So this is what a lot of us look like when we're learning to ski. And this applies to a lot of sports. This applies to, I've got Mike Gerholt back here, who's went to race car driving school, and he said this is the same in race car driving school. Like, when you're starting, you're kind of just focusing on like not crashing the car, I assume, right? And then as we progress, because we're just looking down at our skis, we're just looking at where we are right now. And that's okay. That's a good place to start. You don't want to crash the car. You don't want to fall off your skis. But we want to think about getting to that place where we're looking ahead. This is Lindsey Vonn. She's someone that I admire quite a bit. And she's looking ahead. She's not looking down. Race car drivers are not looking 20 feet ahead of them. They're thinking about their next, how many, 4 turns, 5 turns, 12 turns? 4 turns, okay. I obviously don't know anything about race car driving. I have not been to race car driving school yet. And Lindsey Vonn, she knows where her skis are, right? All these famous race car drivers, they know exactly where they are in the track. So it's not about forgetting where you are today, but it's looking ahead. As you progress as a skier, you're looking 2 turns ahead, 3 turns ahead, 4 turns ahead. Eventually, you're looking straight at the bottom of the mountain, right? But you still know where your skis are. You know where you are. You understand where you are, but you're looking ahead. And I think that that's a behavior we can think about as we're presented with these various problems that come to us as product owners, right, as Salesforce product owners. And it can be hard to do this. It can be really, really hard when it's Q4 and it's busy and the sales business needs something or the marketing business needs something, and they're like, add this checkbox or build this thing. And the reason that we want to think about how to build these behaviors is so that we're ready when that happens, to not be reactive, to not just kind of get caught up in that hubbub, that we're ready to build what is needed. And we do that by setting ourselves up for success with these habits. So I was asked probably 2 years ago, actually, my colleague and I were asked, when we started working on Lightning adoption and thinking about our customers adopting Lightning, I got a request, will you do 2 webinars a month and 2 blogs a month on Lightning, right? And that was the request. But it was valuable to take a step back. And that was, I mean, I did that. Like, I responded to that request. But it was valuable to take a step back and think about, what is the problem we're trying to solve for, right? What is the goal that we're looking at? And how can I better understand where that goal is coming from? Because we don't want to be in our bubble of a product owner or whatever our various roles are, and to just be reactive to these requests. We want to think about understanding the business. And so I took a lot of time when we were working on that initiative to talk to our customers, to talk to our customer groups at Salesforce, to talk to our sales groups at Salesforce, to understand where this was coming from, and also to look at how people were learning in our community, and to think about a solution that would meet this need, but maybe not be exactly, just delivered in the exact way, right? And that's when we built Lightning in a Box, which ended up having, more than 20,000 people have gone through that training. And it wasn't exactly what was asked for, but it was what was needed. And we were able to build that because we thought about what's going on with our industry, what's going on with our customers, what's going on with leaders in our company. So I would challenge all of you to take time to step outside maybe your role or your group and understand what the CFO is talking about, understand what your CMO cares about. Look at what the other groups that you work with. If you're in a technology group, understand what your customer success group is working on. What are the initiatives that they're focused on? What are the things that they're learning through those initiatives? Because then that helps you deliver a more holistic solution and to be really a futurist as you're building for your product. And be in this state of active discovery, constant active discovery. So I used to be a sales engineer at Salesforce. I was a sales engineer for many years, and a large part of sales engineering is spending a lot of time in discovery and understanding how our customers run their business. And I think it's valuable to always be in a state of constant active discovery. So when you're talking to people in your business, better understand what are the processes they're working on, right? What are the obstacles that they're facing? And think about becoming an expert beyond your group. And I think that that is something that it's a hard, again, we're all very busy, right? And we've already set aside an hour a day to learn. So it doesn't feel like we have this time, but this is time that will save you a lot of time later on, because when these challenges present themselves and problems present themselves, you'll better understand the landscape on which they're presented. And create these solutions for problems that no one's asked you for. So this is when we created Lightning in a Box. No one asked us to create that. It didn't exist, that term didn't exist, so definitely no one asked us to create it. But think about looking forward at creating those solutions, because that's, essentially what leaders do. That's one of the core tenets of being a leader. So if you're reactive to problems as they present themselves, you're not necessarily establishing yourself as a leader within your group, within your industry, within your space. But if you're looking ahead, and if you're following all of these various habits, these habits of constant learning, these habits of developing techniques that help you solve these problems, and then when the problems present themselves, you're thinking ahead and looking at, how can I solve this in a way that is tenable in 6 months, in 12 months, that will position us to be successful in 2 years, right? Think forward and try to not be reactive. And that's really how we can, again, be futurists. Because I think as a good product manager, we really all should be futurists. And we all should try to think like futurists, even when it's hard. And when we're busy, and when it's hectic, and when deadlines are swishing by, it feels like we can't do some of these things. It feels like a luxury. I talked about this about a month ago, and I had someone ask me afterwards, how do you set aside an hour a day to learn? It feels like we don't have any time. But when you're setting aside that time for it, and when you're making this that muscle that you're working on constantly, it does get easier to do these things. It does get easier to solve those problems ahead, because you've been actively learning. You're not racing to catch up. You've been developing those techniques that make you strong and that help you solve problems. And you understand the business, you understand the landscape. So it really is behaviors that you can't necessarily turn on, on day one and then act this way on day two. And it's something that we have to constantly revisit. I have to constantly revisit, am I spending my time learning, or am I being reactive? Am I thinking about how people are learning or how people are developing? And reading that research and reading the market reports and talking to customers, or am I being reactive? It's a constant, it's like training for a marathon. It's like you can't train for a marathon once and then be like, okay, 2 years later, yep, I'm ready to go. Let's go to the Boston Marathon, right? That would be a really not fun experience. But you can do it, and you develop those muscles, and then you can come back to it and revisit it and continue to build that. And this is really how all of us in this room, all of you in this room, can be leaders as we go through this time of economic change, as we go through this time of the fourth industrial revolution. And I challenge all of you to think about how can you find that space and that time to develop that habit of constant learning, and what is it that you want to learn? I mean, write it down. Write that challenge for yourself down. At least I have read, I hope most of us read about the science of when you write it down, it makes it more real, like when we write those commitments to ourselves. So write down, what is the technology that you want to learn? What are the goals that you want to obtain, right? And set aside that time. Put it on your calendar. Put it on a Post-it note. Whatever works for you, like commit to that, because it'll help you stay positioned as a leader as those 3.3 million jobs are added. And develop those techniques. Think about, what are those techniques we want to develop for? What are those? Is it learning to build Lightning components? Is it learning to work with Einstein prediction fields? Like, what are those techniques that you want to develop, right? And practice that and share it. Say, here's the 3 interesting things I did with my Einstein prediction, and share that with your friends or colleagues or community group members and acquaintances, and say, what would you build with this, right? And challenge yourself to grow in that way. And think ahead. So spend that time actively discovering and expanding your knowledge of what's going on in your company, what's going on in your industry, and think about next time that problem comes across your desk, we get a little case notification, give me that checkbox on the lead, right? How can we take that further and understand what's the origin for that question, what's the origin for that problem, and how can we solve in a way that is thinking like a futurist and that is innovating and not just solving the problem on the same level it was created, it's solving it on a different level. So I challenge all of you to take these actions, and I would love to hear about how it's going for all of you. And that is how you can all be leaders in this fourth industrial revolution. Thank you. And we do have about 5 minutes, so if anyone has any questions, I'll be here. Oh, Romans 20, Ruhl is how you start his name. It's a very good cookbook.